I would love to pick your brain on that narrative that you've been trying to create around the changes that are happening in the world of sports, how advertising and all the money that's coming in, that's happened over the last 5, 7, 10 years. How are things evolving there? Take us through that.
So in 2014, what inspired me to jump onto this entire bandwagon is Kavita's beautiful narrative around the intersection between content and money. And I remember, I don't know if you guys recall, IPL 2014 had an ad called Kanna Keep Calm, where it showed starsports.com and their mobile website, if I'm not mistaken, or they had an app at the time. But it basically talked about how sports is something that is so interesting as a mode of content. It carries a lot more weight than I think any form of content. Now, we've had an interesting experience over the last 9 IPLs as consumers, as well as a technology provider to 9 IPLs in a row that helps them manage the ads business. We've seen the scale of viewership of the IPL go through the roof. There's a little logo at the top right that says, "Here's the concurrency." And I remember we had drinks in 2014 because that concurrency crossed 1 lakh. And last IPL, it crossed 20 million. Okay, 20 million concurrent viewers. Across the IPL, I think about 400 million viewers were able to watch the IPL on a digital platform. From a business model, we saw digital being bundled with television ads as campaigns to today being able to command a ridiculous amount of revenue and rights on its own. We've also seen tech capabilities scale. Kavita has always talked about this ecosystem approach to any form of content monetization and not relying on only one mode of making revenue. Today, in the last IPL, you could open it, you could watch it, you could play a game, you could forecast, you could run your fantasy league alongside, you could order food without leaving the Hotstar app. Okay, the sheer amount of capabilities that tech is enabling is staggering, and I don't even think 2 years ago we would have been able to predict this. And so, what we've been doing over the last few weeks is diving deep into the value of sports, the value of sports as a league, the value of sports as content. And of course, the benchmark for this is the value of a sports rights. We are seeing various technology and media companies bid to be able to showcase a sports league on their airwaves. And we've seen the value of sports leagues go from a double to triple to 10 times to 15 times the value at the last auction. And this is becoming a very lucrative business on its own.
I actually want to. I have put out some numbers that I want to share with the audience. Right, in 2008, when Sony bought the IPL rights, per season they were paying 820 crores. Right, so they had an 8,200 crore contract for 10 years, and this was at that time just TV was the only thing sold, and I think Hotstar and the digital rights were sold later point in time, but just TV. 820 crores per season, right? Come 2017, when the contract got renegotiated and Star Sports and Hotstar got the TV and digital rights, it was 3,300 crores per season. That's a CAGR growth, compounded annual growth of 15%, right? For 10 years. That is astounding. If that wasn't enough, 2022, which is the last auction that we did, right? Just the TV rights were sold for 4,700 crores, and just the digital rights were sold for 4,100 crores. So there's a bunch of interesting points apart from the growth itself, which is in the last 5 years, there's been a 21% compounded annual growth in the media rights. But digital now being as much as TV is coming back to all the points that you guys are mentioning. That flippening is happening, right? Because this is obviously a better technology, can be better targeted, can be measured better, there's so much more room for interactiveness and everything. That flippening is clearly in front of us, right? And in a country like India, if that's happened, I mean, the western part of the world has already moved on more to digital, I would assume, or maybe not. I don't think they have Geo there, so their data is still pretty expensive.
Hmm.
But I think this is just IPL. And one more, I think, just another example. I think the Formula One rise has been phenomenal, right? It's driven by all the trends that you're talking about. The way we are consuming content is changing. Where we are consuming content is changing. How that impacts back to sport is a. I think Formula One is a classic case study. So Formula One's 2012 valuation was $9 billion, right? This is at its peak, I think 500 million viewers. And 2016 valuation, when Liberty Media bought it, it was $4.4 billion, right? So viewership cut down to 110 million viewers. The sport was going nowhere. I think the chief at some point famously said, "I don't care about the millennials. I only care about these rich people, and that's where I'm going to focus on the sport," right? And Liberty Media came in and did a bunch of interesting things with content, with creating sachets in terms of the content that you can consume on YouTube and different places about Formula One, creating that drama around it. 2019, their contract with ESPN was $5 million a year. 2022, that contract was $80 million a year. That's 3 years that we're talking about, where significant rise in the value of Formula One and their media rights, right? And today they're saying, rough estimation, what was bought for $4.4 billion in 2016, 6 years later, that's worth $17 billion. Formula One today is worth $17 billion, right? And these are all the trends that you've been talking about, all coming together. And we can see the results of it. I just wanted to give some numbers before you moved on with,
Yeah.
why do you think this is happening? What's leading to this?
Yeah. I remember we were in the office in 2017 when we watched the IPL rights go for $2 billion. It went for about 16 two odd $1 billion, 16,000 crore.
Yeah.
And we said, no way. There is no way this is worth it. These people are stupid. They're not going to make this money back. What are they thinking? Blah, blah, blah. And then 2022 rolled around and it tripled. Right? And it didn't just triple. There were some interesting underlying stories. Right? For the first time,
Yeah.
they said no composite bidding. So they made you bid separately for different packages. While you're right in the sense that TV went for 4,700 crore and digital went for 4,100 crore, the base price that was set was actually far wider. The base
Hmm.
price that was set for television rights was 49 crore a match, and digital rights was 33 crore a match. And what started to happen is as the bids went higher and higher and higher, the gap between the value of television and digital rights, as set by the buyer, came down from a 48% gap to a 14% gap. So the buyers themselves are seeing so much more value in digital as a standalone offering and TV as a standalone offering that the value of those rights have started to come closer and closer to together. And so it's very evident to us that of course, the people who are bidding for these rights are probably not playing by the same financial rules as traditional businesses. They see a lot more in it. They're able to play using a very different war chest, so to speak. But across the globe, we were fascinated by the fact that sports has come a long way. That Lata Mangeshkar example that you're talking about, as funny as it is, tells us such an interesting story. So there's a Twitter handle called India Wants to Know Quiz, and it's a quiz that became popular during the pandemic. They used to host it during the lockdown, and so they still put out a lot of trivia that I love to read. And they were talking about how the 1983 Indian cricket team won and came back, and the sentiments were so high that the BCCI promised them 1 lakh in prize. And these are cricketers who would typically make 200 rupees a day plus food and stay expenses. Effectively making like 2,000, 3,000 rupees a day in match fees. And you suddenly promise them 1 lakh each, and they didn't have the money for it. And Lata Mangeshkar
When you say
did a
they, this is BCCI who didn't have the money for it.
BCCI. BCCI didn't have the money for it. So the story goes.
Think,
And
I
so they
mean,
roped in.
can't even imagine it today, right? Like BCCI not having the money.
Yeah. And they roped in Lata Mangeshkar, who till the day she died was known as India's biggest cricket fan. She was at every Tendulkar match. She and Raj Singh Dungapur, of course, have a relationship that went back decades. And so she stepped up. She had a concert where famously Kapil Dev sang with her on stage. And so they were able to raise money. And we've come from there to Serena Williams now evolving from the sport. I'm very excited to watch the US Open this week. I really want her to win on her way out. But it doesn't matter. She has like 23 slams to her name, so it really doesn't matter to her. But
She
she's
could be the
evolving
first
from the sport.
billionaire, right? She could be the first female billionaire to come out from a sport, I think.
I'm sure she will. There is no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was looking at just on a standalone basis the kind of performance that Serena Ventures, her VC fund, has been able to deliver. It's staggering. Like she's made 70 investments, of which 16 are unicorns. I, I don't know what to say. She's probably going to be the goat, not just in tennis but in venture capital if she plays this right.
And I
Um,
think this is an interesting trend. I think that you hinted about earlier, which is it was being controlled by these centralized, large organizations that were saying, "Hey, this is the media, right? And this is what I'm going to charge, and that money is going to stay with me." To and this you mentioned this in the podcast where the NBA Players Association negotiated a contract back in 2014 where they said the media rights need to be shared with us also because we are an integral part of what makes this sport. Tell us. I think there was a reason why a lot of people ended up staying that season, right, Anand?
Yeah, so that kicked in 2 years after that. So in 2016, I think it was the Cleveland Cavaliers that won the NBA championship. And that was the year that ad revenue was going to be shared with the players. And interestingly, the NBA Players Association has this thing called the collective bargaining agreement, which is something they negotiate annually with the NBA. And I didn't know that years and years ago, they had negotiated into the collective bargaining agreement a pandemic clause that in the event of a pandemic, if the games get suspended, there is still some amount of pay that they take home. So it's one of those
Wow.
very interesting documents that if you ever get a chance to read, you should go ahead and read it. But they were able to weave in ad revenue shares into the agreement. And in 2016, after 2 years after they agreed, it was going to kick in. So there was a lot of players who unretired, and in that 1 year made more money than they made their entire career
Wow.
in the NBA. There are several such stories of sports persons able to unlock multiple modes of revenue, to use Kavita's ecosystem analogy, where the LTV, the lifetime value of you as a sports person, is not just a function of how much you can make from that team. It is your
Hmm.
brand, what you endorse, the legitimacy that you offer to your endorsements. It is something called NIL, name, image, likeness, which gives you value in a PlayStation game, not just in the league. There are now sports persons who run agencies of their own. Naomi Osaka represents Nick Kyrgios. Her agency represents Nick Kyrgios. Serena Williams has an agency. LeBron James has a dear friend called Rich Paul who runs an agency, and incidentally, he is now dating Adele.
Oof. Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
he's the power broker for the NBA, right? Like he has all the really good players and he becomes the
he
power broker.
owns
Yeah.
a part of Liverpool. I don't know how many people know that. LeBron James is a part owner in Liverpool.
Yeah. And a part owner in AC Milan now, by the way, or they're about to bid.
Yes,
Uh, yeah.
yes.
So this trend, do you think this is happening because of how tech has changed and what that has resulted in is these players now having a direct interaction, a direct bond with the fans versus back in the day it was when I came on television to play, that's when you would see me as a sports person and maybe a couple of Pepsi ads after that, but there was nothing else in between, right? Why do you think the power to the actual player has increased so much over the last few years?
I think there's something about it that is quite authentic, which didn't used to be the case early on. I remember, and I hate to say this, but every time I watched uh, cricketing greats shill a product, at some point I'm like, man, these guys can't act. I remember Tendulkar speaking in an advertisement. I'm like, good God, this guy's struggling. But there's an element of that that has now become so authentic in its
Hmm.
representation that they're also being very picky about it. I think one of the reasons why sports and the value of sports has now gone through the roof is down to four things. One is, for me, sports as a very standalone form of content, form of entertainment, is just in a league of its own. It has emotional value. It has sentimental value. It has very high entertainment value. It's one of the only things that has a huge gap between watching it live and watching it later. If I miss a movie in the theater, I can always watch it. If I miss today's game, tomorrow the airwaves of the world already carry that information, and whatever I do is going to be stale. There is no other form of content that has that much power. Maybe the Oscars, but even the Oscars, I can't remember a time when I watched it live from start to finish. Right? I just kept an eye on Twitter, and it also happens kind of at an odd hour of the day. But I just want to know who won, and even that stopped mattering now because a lot of people say, the Oscars are overrated. But there is something about sport as an entity in real time when it's live that has this cult value that is just unmatched. And it also has a lot of social value, right? I watch it, I host a party. Kavita has hosted several of us at her house to watch like IPL games, India Pakistan matches. There's an element where you come together as a community to watch sport in a manner that you never do for any other form of
Hmm.
content. But for me, the most important thing is with all of this power, it is for me the only form of content or entertainment where ads are so normal,
Hmm.
right? I can see an Adidas logo on your jersey right now, and I don't think I'm being advertised to by
Yeah.
Adidas, right?
Yeah.
But I am right now, right?
Yeah.
Sports persons have endorsed brands for decades. On a football field, the ads along the baseline, along the sidelines are so normal. In a cricket match, between overs, I expect to see an ad. In fact, if an ad doesn't show, I'm like, yeah, what happened? Where is the ad? Right? It is the only form of content where ads are not just normal and expected. We are perfectly okay with that. We
So both
like
these
them.
things that you both these things that you're talking about, the emotional value, the social value, and the fact that ads are integrated, have always existed, right? So this is inherent to sports since time immemorial, right?
Yes.
What's unlocked it?
The second trend for me is the evolution of technology. Okay.
Hmm.
I can watch it live wherever I am. I can carry it with me. I can access it anywhere, anytime. And I can not just watch it, I can watch it, I can interact with it, I can now transact, right? I can shop. I can interact with sports. I can bet money. There are various companies that have legalized betting in sports to an extent where I can get a very different experience out of it. It can be a lean back experience if I wanted to. It can be a lean forward experience if I wanted to. There's this
Yeah.
concept called fast, free ad supported streaming television, which basically is a way for you to watch traditional scheduled programming on an internet enabled device and ad supported. But those ads are contextual, they're targeted, they're relevant. So this has basically taken everything that was normal and supercharged it to a point where it's a fantastic experience for multiple stakeholders. For advertisers, for sports leagues, for sports persons for whom this is a much bigger platform than it ever was. And for me
Hmm.
as a fan who can consume it in any way I want. I can just look at the score, or I can consume it, or I can watch it, or I can lean into it, I can interact, I can bet, I can be a part of a fantasy league. There are 20 different ways in which I can be a consumer of this one event. And all of it is because of the fact that technology has enabled it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
this
sure.
concept of technology enabling it, right? There was this little bit of a valley between networks actually sitting up and figuring out how they should get on this tech bandwagon, because regular people, audiences, were stealing their thunder, right? They would have courtside seats, they would be taking videos, they would pussy it on YouTube before anything they could break anything. It would be up on the internet, everybody would be running after it. So live sports started to take a huge hit because of the audience in the stadium in itself, right? Because people were enabled with, they had mobile phones, there was the internet, they were funny, they put it up in time, so they had the advantage of timing on their hands, especially with live sports. It didn't take like companies like ESPN too long to organize themselves, have a paid army of people who actually attend these stadiums and these live matches and live sports, and actually start tweeting and putting it out onto various platforms, because they just wanted to be there at that point in time. They just wanted to make sure that they were blocking out anybody else from taking away or stealing their thunder. And then monetization came into play because people started to watch it and they enabled monetization on it. And like Anand said, this whole concept of easy access to tools and capabilities to monetize against your videos and against your content became order of the day. And then it became a game of trying to negotiate your way into a better deal with these organizations, whether you do it with a YouTube or an Instagram. The other one is the concept of niches at scale, right? And I don't know whether you watched Jerry Maguire. And remember how he wants Cuba Gooding Jr. to be liked by his audience and be authentic, right? Be vulnerable, and then that little dance happens, and that's when his like kind of worth kind of goes up, and that's when he's able to sort of lock in that deal. The concept of authenticity in online is something that is you can bear all. I mean, we all read Serena Williams' resignation or like retirement ode, right? It was on her Instagram. It was also in Vogue magazine, right? So it's two different types of audiences, and and we all read it on. We all went to Vogue and read it right there, but she put it up on her Instagram handle. So it's like meeting of two different worlds. I don't think you read Vogue on a daily basis, do you, Anand? Right? But we all sat
No,
there
but
and read it.
I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, you read that, right? And it was on Vogue's handle. So it and but she put it up on her Instagram handle first, and so then we discovered what she had to say, and then we went to Vogue and read the whole bunch on Vogue, and we saw all her pictures and what it was a very deep and insightful piece about her, right? And so. However, she's playing right now the US Open. We know that there is a backstory to what's happening and why she's crying and why Venus is, what she is to her. And there's a whole story behind Serena which is larger than life for us, and that's what sports personalities or any personality is. And so earlier there were, like you were saying, there were brands, there were TV ads, there were movies, there were things that they were hammy in, and you were like, why are these people doing this stuff? And then there is this authentic self that they're just putting out there that people want to love. And spectator sport is just that, right? You want the love and adulation of the audience, and the audience wants to give it, and they want to know more about that particular athlete, because that's what you're here to do, see them at their best and their worst, and sort of it's a very emotional connection. So the concept of bearing down and sort of settling into just being as human as you can and using technology to do it is where we are today, which is making people richer, because that's attention, and attention can be monetized. And we are happy to monetize it, because and they're happy, and we're happy to sort of give our attention, because there is some level of, you cannot explain it in terms of love for your sports person, right? You're
Yeah.
just there, you're just there, is just you have all my attention. Whatever you want to throw at me, I'll take it at this point in time. So I feel like technology, yes, has accelerated it. It's also made us, while it's made us less human, it's made us more human at the in the same way. And so that's something that you can't put a number on it, and that's why it's constantly clicking up and up. Because if you go down to local sports as well, and you want to watch your kid playing a local sports match on YouTube channel live, you will do it, right? You will get your entire office to watch, you will get your family to watch, you will have at least 300 people watching it at some point in time, because everybody's kids and extended family are sitting there and rooting for this child who's playing a match in a local field. And that's what's happening. So you will see local sports, you will see obscure sports, you will see mainstream sports, everything kind of popping up. And we'll have niches at scale, because we are able to choose as human beings where we want to spend our emotional energy. And sports has it all, and we all love sports.